My name is Kaelvor, and I am the last ambassador of a world that no longer exists. I write this from a cargo bay that was never meant to hold people. The walls are bare metal. The air smells of sweat and fear, and the faint chemical bitterness of recycled oxygen. Around me, 30,000 of my people sleep in shifts on the cold floor, wrapped in whatever they managed to carry when they ran. Children press against their parents. Elders sit upright because their bodies have forgotten how to rest. A physician named Orvine moves quietly between the rows, checking bandages, pressing water to cracked lips, pretending she has more medicine than she does. We are aboard the colony vessel Pale Veil. She was built to carry farm equipment and soil samples. She was not built for this. Nothing was built for this. 72 hours. That is how long it took the Vreth Dominion to destroy the Valorian home system. 72 hours to end 4,000 years of history. They did not send a warning. They did not ask for surrender. They simply arrived. And then they started. And they did not stop until there was nothing left to stop. 3 colony ships escaped. The Vreth caught 2 of them before they reached the FTL boundary. We watched it happen on the long-range screen. We did not look away. I think we all understood, in that moment, that looking away would have been a kind of betrayal. So now there is only the Pale Veil, and 30,000 of us. And the dark. I sent the distress signal myself. I sat at the communications console, and I encoded it carefully. Our coordinates, our condition, our numbers, our situation. And I routed it through the Galactic Accord Emergency Relay Network. The relay calculates automatically which registered member species falls within response range. The answer came back within seconds. Humanity. I had heard of them. In the way that you hear about a small river you have never needed to cross. Young species. Single inhabited world. Still arguing amongst themselves about territorial lines, which the older civilizations found both amusing and slightly exhausting. They had a space fleet. Most species developed one eventually, built around something they called energy spike drives, which our engineers considered primitive but functional. They had been members of the Galactic Accord for less than 2 centuries, which, in the lifespan of civilizations, is barely enough time to learn the correct handshake. I expected a medical frigate, perhaps 2, maybe a cargo ship carrying food and basic survival equipment. I sent the signal because I had to send something, and humanity was what the relay offered me. I did not send it with hope. I sent it the way a person calls out in a dark room, not because they believe someone will answer, but because silence feels worse. The automated acknowledgement arrived 40 minutes later. Short, direct. SOS received. Assistance en route. ETA 9.6 hours. UEF command. My first officer, a quiet woman named Selva, read it over my shoulder and said nothing for a long time. Then she asked what UEF stood for. I told her I did not know. We looked it up in the Accord database. United Earth Federation. She nodded slowly, as though this information had confirmed something she had not quite decided yet. We had 9.6 hours. The Vreth would arrive in 11. The mathematics were close, but they were on our side, barely. I allowed myself to believe, for approximately 4 hours, that we might survive this. Then the sensors changed. The Vreth fleet had pushed its engines past the safe operating threshold. They were burning fuel they could not afford to burn. They would arrive in 8 hours now, not 11. Selva ran the calculation 3 times, because that is the kind of person she is. And each time the answer was the same. The Vreth had seen the Accord relay ping. They knew humanity had responded, and they had decided that arriving before help could reach us was worth any cost. I sat with that for a long time. The Vreth, the same force that dismantled our entire civilization without pausing to consider the cost, were spending precious resources to prevent a human ship from reaching us in time. I did not understand it then. I filed it away. I had other things to manage. I walked through the cargo bay for 3 hours. I did not do it because I had anything useful to offer. I did it because I am an ambassador, and an ambassador's most basic function is presence. I sat with Orvine while she treated a man whose arm had been damaged in the escape. I sat with an elderly couple who had brought nothing with them except a small sealed case I never asked about. I sat with a group of children who were playing a quiet game with pebbles they had collected from the floor, inventing rules as they went, adapting, making something out of nothing. I thought, we are very good at that. We always have been. It did not feel like enough. With 3 hours remaining, I returned to the communications console and composed a message to the incoming human vessel. I introduced myself. I explained our situation in careful, simple terms. I told them about the Vreth fleet, its new trajectory, the revised timing. I asked, as politely as I knew how, whether they had received updated sensor data and whether their response plan had accounted for the change. The reply came back in 11 minutes. Acknowledged, Ambassador. We see them. Keep your people calm. Captain Osei, UES Thermopylae. I showed it to Selva. She read it twice. They only sent one ship, she said. Not as a complaint. As a statement of fact. The way you might note that the weather has changed. It seems so, I said. She did not say anything else. With 90 minutes left, the Vreth fleet entered visual sensor range. 9 warships. 1 fleet carrier, which is a vessel designed to deploy smaller craft in large numbers. The fleet carrier alone outmassed everything else in the Vreth formation. It was, by any reasonable military calculation, an overwhelming force for a single disabled civilian ship with no weapons and a failing engine. I looked at the 30,000 people behind me. I thought about the 4,000 years. I began to compose, in the back of my mind, the words I would say to them when the time came. I wanted the words to be honest, and I wanted them to be kind, and I did not know yet if both things were possible at once. Then the FTL alarm sounded. A single vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the sensor grid. 1 ship. I looked at the mass shadow it left behind in the residual FTL field, the invisible footprint a vessel leaves when it decelerates from superluminal speed, and the number my console returned made no immediate sense. I checked it again. The Pale Veil herself, fully loaded, massed roughly 400,000 tons. The mass shadow on my screen belonged to something that massed over 3 million. Selva read it over my shoulder in silence. The hull designator resolved on the screen a moment later. UES Thermopylae. Sovereign-class Dreadnought. 4.2 kilometers from bow to stern. 28 naval-grade railgun arrays. 400 missile launch tubes. Point defense systems dense enough and fast enough that the technical notes in the Accord database compared their coverage to a geometric net rather than a series of individual weapons. 1 ship. They had sent 1 ship. And the ship they had sent was this. A channel opened. It carried to both the Pale Veil and the Vreth fleet simultaneously. The voice was a woman's. Calm, with the particular quality of someone who has been calm in rooms that required it many times before. This is Admiral Carla Osei of the United Earth Federation vessel Thermopylae. The vessel you are pursuing has requested humanitarian protection under the Interstellar Accord. You are advised to withdraw. If you require assistance in withdrawing, we are prepared to provide it. 11 seconds of silence followed. I counted them. I had time to count them, because nothing happened for 11 full seconds after Admiral Osei finished speaking. 11 seconds in which the Vreth fleet, the same force that had not hesitated, not paused, not considered for a single moment when it arrived above my world, said nothing and did nothing. I had studied military history for most of my adult life. I had read about battles decided before a single weapon was fired, decided purely by the weight of what one side represented in the mind of the other. I had always considered such accounts romantic exaggerations. I stopped considering that during those 11 seconds. The Vreth fleet carrier finally responded. Its commander's voice was flat and mechanical through the translation filter. You are 1 ship. Admiral Osei said. I'm aware. A pause. We are 9. Another pause. Slightly shorter. Also aware. The Vreth attacked. What followed, I experienced entirely through sound and sensor data, because there was nothing to see with the naked eye at these distances. What I heard was a deep, repeating percussion, each impact registering as a physical vibration through the hull of the Pale Veil, and underneath it, a constant lower tone that I later understood was the Thermopylae's drives running at full power, because the Thermopylae was moving. Not holding position as a fortress holds position, absorbing what comes and returning fire, moving, accelerating, covering angles and cutting vectors in a way that the sensor track made look almost graceful, which seemed deeply wrong for something the size of a small city. 2 Vreth destroyers went dark on my sensor screen within the first 90 seconds. A third followed before 4 minutes had passed. The Vreth fleet carrier launched its full complement of strike craft, hundreds of them, filling the sensor grid like a cloud. I watched Selva's hands tighten on the console edge. I heard someone behind me make a sound that was not quite a word. The strike craft accelerated toward the Thermopylae, in a formation that our tactical database classified as a saturation approach. Too many targets, moving too fast, from too many directions, to be individually countered. The Thermopylae's point defense grid activated. It sounded like rain on a metal roof. A very fast, very dense rain. It lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, the strike craft were gone. Not retreated. Gone. I sat in my seat and breathed, and tried to find, in any language I knew, a word for what I had just witnessed. I could not find one. There are things that exist outside the boundaries of existing vocabulary, and you have to simply hold them in your mind without a label, until the mind builds one of its own. The remaining Vreth warships broke formation and ran. The Thermopylae did not pursue them. It held its position, steady and enormous, between the pale veil and the direction from which the Vreth had come, standing there, staying there. I opened a channel, and my voice, when I spoke, was not entirely steady. Admiral Osei accepted the channel immediately. I thanked her. I used formal Valorian diplomatic phrasing, which is designed for moments of great weight, and even that felt inadequate. She listened to all of it, and when I finished, she said, simply, "You sent an SOS, we came." The way she said it, not as a boast, not as a lesson, but as a plain description of obvious events, was the most disorienting thing I had heard all day. Human crew members docked with the Pale Veil within the hour. They brought food in sealed containers and medical supplies in hard cases, and 3 engineers who immediately disappeared into our engine room and began arguing cheerfully with each other about the best approach to the drive problem. They were loud and enthusiastic, and seemed genuinely pleased to have something difficult to fix. One of them, a young man, barely old enough to be called an adult, with tired eyes and a steady manner, sat down on the cargo floor near a Valorian girl who had not spoken since we escaped. He did not try to speak to her. He did not try to make her feel better. He just sat near her, close enough to be present, far enough not to crowd her, and he opened his ration pack and ate half of it, and then, without looking at her directly, placed the other half on the floor between them. She looked at it for a long time, then she took it. I watched this happen, and I thought about the Thermopylae and its 400 missile tubes, and its point defense rain, and I thought about this young man and his half-eaten ration, and I thought, this is the same species. Both of these things come from the same place. Later, I asked Admiral Osei why they had sent a Dreadnought. Why not a convoy, a medical response team, a more proportionate answer to what was, on paper, a refugee situation. She was quiet for a moment, looking at something beyond the camera. Then she said, "Because we knew who was chasing you. We'd been watching the Vreth for years. The Thermopylae was already moving before your signal finished transmitting. They had been watching. They had been paying attention to something no one else had acted on, and when the moment came, they did not send what was comfortable or convenient, or mathematically sufficient. They sent what would make the outcome certain. I am writing my report now, to whatever remains of the Valorian government in exile. I am choosing my words very carefully, because the words matter, and because I want whoever reads this to understand what I understood in that cargo bay. Do not mistake humanity's youth for weakness. Do not mistake their small numbers, or their single world for limitation. They are not a species still learning who they are. They are a species in the middle of deciding it, and the decision they keep making, against all logic, against all self-interest, against every reasonable calculation of cost and benefit, is this one. When someone calls out in the dark, you go. They did not send help. They sent a promise. A 4.2-kilometer promise made of steel and absolute certainty, carrying a message that needed no translation in any language I have ever learned. Not today. Not while we are here. Not ever, if we can help it. I do not have a word for what that is, but I find that I do not need one. Some things are large enough to be simply felt,